So yeah.
So what about my guy, Joe Milton, hitting New York? New York City, like they did last year with Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman, to make some NIL deals to get these guys out in front of the cameras. And Joe Milton certainly wants to be so. As we saw Anthony Richardson of Florida get drafted high on potential, I think Joe Milton could be that type of guy. However, people want to compare him to T. Martin because the natural comparison is to say Hendon Hooker, like Peyton Manning, got Tennessee to a championship type of level, and you want Joe Milton to be the guy that wins you the title, i.e. T. Martin. The best comparison for him is not Anthony Richardson. It might be in the draft process, but he's played already as much as Richardson has, and by the end of this season, he'll have played a lot more. The best comparison's Cam Newton. 6'6". I wrote it on offthehooksports.com. He brought it up. I can only assume he read my column. So that's what put that in his mind that he should be comparable to Cam Newton. Thank you very much, Joe, for being a regular visitor to the website offthehooksports.com. I think Cam Newton's a fantastic comparison in a lot of different reasons. He also said he wants to win 3 rings. You don't actually get a ring for winning the East, and I think you just get 1 championship overall. But how did you think he carried himself on Good Morning Football and some other platforms that were out there? Thought he did a great job. He's way different from Hendon Hooker. He's more outspoken, I would say more affable, whereas Hendon Hooker is reserved. But I thought, just like Hendon Hooker did last year, that he represented the University of Tennessee extremely well.
I thought he's doing a great job. I thought he did a great job representing himself too, and I have a lot of respect for how he carries himself. I'm starting to get a little nervous for his sake about some of the media hype. We're talking about a guy who, he may fight you on this all day, but I don't care if he wants to fight you on this. He lost his starting job. I don't care if he disputes that at all. He lost his starting job. And when people compare him to T. Martin, and even Cam Newton, those guys somewhat... Cam Newton never lost a starting job. T. Martin was completely under the radar in 1998 until he broke out when the season started. Joe Milton, we're talking... I mean, Good Morning Football brings on a guy that was a backup the last 2 years that we didn't know was going to keep the starting job in spring practice. And I'm turning into Dave pre-spring practice right now. But I got to be honest. And now we bring up a Cam Newton comparison who had at least the second best single season in SEC football history. Yeah, you can't argue with the first. Joe Burrow had the best, but definitely the second best, maybe tied with Johnny Manziel in 2012. But one of the greatest single seasons in the history of college football. And we're comparing Joe Milton to him now. Are we with that and him going to New York and on these football NFL shows when he hasn't started the last few years, and he did lose his starting job, and he's lost his starting job at 2 different schools, and there's been massive questions about his play. Is he getting a little bit too much national press now?
Okay. This is where I like to think of myself, even though I'm almost 40. I like to think of myself as adaptable, Caleb. 5 years ago, Dave would have said to you, and I like to refer to myself in third person. Dave does that quite often, doesn't Dave? I would have said to you, Caleb, they're pushing him too much. He's too out there. I would have said the same thing about Hendon Hooker last year, but the game has completely changed. This is like adding the forward pass in recruiting and roster management, and that is NIL money. So I would have said last year, you're blowing him up. He's got too big of a head. He doesn't need to be out there. Same thing for Joe Milton this year. Hendon Hooker last year. What are you guys doing? Tennessee's PR arm is crazy. And it may end up having a negative effect on some of these guys. It didn't with Hooker last year, but it could. But you have to take that gamble because then you're in front of millions of people and recruits, and you can sell this NIL and the ability to get exposure. So old Dave of years past, would have completely agreed with you. Now you got to push him. You got to push him because it's better for the program. So I got zero problem with it. And it's not him calling Good Morning Football and saying, hey, can you put me on? This is Tennessee making this happen. So I think it's kind of like charging for parking when you go to a game. You don't want to pay for parking, do you? But ultimately, that's just part of it. So pushing these kids before perhaps they're ready is just part of it. Same thing with Hendon last year.
But we knew last year that Hendon was going to be a great quarterback in 2022 because we saw what he did in 2021. I know you think, yeah, he was.
Let me stop you there. I didn't. Okay, so
we
maybe
knew he was going to be as good. Well, we didn't know he was going to be as good as he was. But
I thought. I'll be honest with you. I thought he would be a B quarterback last year, and he turned out to be an A+.
We don't know that Joe Milton's even going to be a B quarterback this year. That's the thing. Okay, when you're pushing these guys, when you're pushing Hendon Hooker in 1997, when you're pushing Peyton Manning pre-NIL era, no one, let's be honest, yes, Peyton Manning was the number 1 draft pick had he gone out in 96, but no one knew Peyton Manning was going to have that year he had in 97. Still the greatest single season a quarterback's ever had in Tennessee football history. And pushing Eric Berry in 2009, these are players that we knew were at least going to be very good starters. We knew Hooker was going to be very good. I mean, even you said B, that's above average. I thought maybe
very good though. Very good means B+ or A-.
Well, he was B+ or A- in 2021, so I thought he was going to at least be that in 2022. And so
okay, well then I was too hard on him because I still had questions about his accuracy downfield.
Oh, I did too, but I didn't have questions about his decision making, and I knew his accuracy was better than Milton's, and those two things were a big deal. So we knew Hooker was going to be good. We didn't know he was going to be great. We don't even know that Joe Milton's going to be good. We don't even know that he's going to hold on to his starting job this year. So I'm thinking more, Dave, I'm getting vibes of, dare I say 2005 when Fulmer was going on national media and saying that Eric Ainge has Peyton Manning qualities.
I don't remember him saying that. And I was
He did.
Did he really say that?
He said after his freshman year, Eric possesses many of the qualities Peyton Manning had.
Well, that's the dumbest statement ever. I mean, and I don't mean any offense to Eric, but I mean, that's a once in a not even generation type of leader and type of work ethic. I can't believe he put that sort of pressure on Eric. I'm sure that was to try to motivate him in some shape, form, or fashion. And Philip did that through the newspaper on several occasions, especially with the offensive line. He'd say they'd have a bad day and they'd come back and they'd have an incredible day the next day. So I guess that actually I'm still taken aback that he said that, and I probably wrote it.
Well, what Fulmer acknowledged later, and remember he was holding open practices for ESPN during that 2005.
Yes, I busted one of those up.
Oh, you did?
Did I tell you that? I was on the radio, and I was like, you can't hold a private practice just for ESPN. So I just left the radio show, and they did call-ins to me, and I drove down the practice field, and I did live reports while ESPN was there standing on the practice field because I didn't think it was fair that you open it up for one media outlet and not the other. And next thing I know, Bud Ford's screaming, shut her down, you can't broadcast from here. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Well,
so Fulmer acknowledged the reason, and it was around the same time he said this about Ainge. The reason he was doing all this promotion, if you remember, Auburn had just gone undefeated the year before and had been left out of the national title. He felt he had a national title caliber team, and he was worried that if he didn't do all the promotion, that Tennessee could go undefeated and be left out of the national title in 2005. And of course, instead they were 5-6.
Yeah, I guess. Still a really dumb thing to say and puts too much pressure on a young man.
I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, it's dumb in a lot of ways.
Particularly when you couldn't even name him the starter.
Yeah, I mean, there were questions about Peyton Manning being a starter just because everything went haywire his freshman year with Brandon Stewart and Todd Helton and all that, for those that don't know. And a lot of people like Stewart more. As a matter of fact, it was pretty close to 50-50, maybe 60-40 Manning. But that was because you were in the middle of the season. When you have the offseason to figure it out, you've got to know your starter, and is it Rick Clausen or is it Eric Ainge or is it Brent Schaefer? You've got to have a good idea for that, and he apparently did not.